Hello, today we're going to talk about something that's becoming a little bit more popular on the current patch, which is playing around Ashe and Crystal Gambit. We're going to discuss how broken it really is, what the conditions are for playing this comp, as well as some general tips on how to have some success with it. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. So normally I'm doing daily TFT guides on this channel. I also do some tier lists and some other for fun stuff. In this case, we're going to be doing a specific deep dive on one particular comp and asking ourselves if Ashe and Crystal Gambit are broken on the current patch. So let's get straight into it. What's happening with Ashe right now? Well, Ashe, she kind of has been in an awkward spot where she's not been very good on the last couple of patches, just because she got this huge nerf to how she scaled with attack speed. So only until recently, after repeated buffs to her kit, she's starting to see a little bit more play. But she's actually becoming really popular now. If you haven't seen it already in your servers, I guarantee you this will be something that's a lot more popular within the next coming days, which is actually playing around 5 Crystal Gambit with Ashe. The board looks something like this, but the idea is that you're basically playing around 5 Crystal Gambit as the main way to scale yourself into late game. And in addition to that 5 Crystal Gambit, you're basically going to be playing around Ashe as a primary carry, and this is going to be a level 8 comp where you can play around your Forecast, your Cassante, and your Jarfins as your main tanks. If you squint a little bit and you try to focus down and see what does this comp kind of look like, it looks very similar to a previous comp that I actually made a guide on, which was Malzahar with 5 Crystal Gambit, and in some cases you might have seen a similar variation where you were playing Ahri with 5 Crystal Gambit. But this is the key part of the comp. It's not necessarily about Ashe, it's not necessarily about playing Duelist with Ashe, it's specifically playing around 5 Crystal Gambit. 5 Crystal Gambit, if you read Crystal Gambit in general, it's basically the dedicated lose streak trait for the set. Basically what that means is that if you lose a bunch of rounds, you can convert that into some sort of cash out reward, and then you have all these cool things that can make you spike really hard and then hopefully win out. But additionally, in addition to doing all of that and gathering this gem power and all this bonus stuff, there's these divisions of 3, 5, or 7 Crystal Gambit. 3 Crystal Gambit, basically you just activate it to get the whole lost streak thing going on, but 5 Crystal Gambit actually is a little bit different. For every amount of kills, which the kills will reroll into a different number, you get bonus loot, and that's what makes 5 Crystal Gambit extremely powerful and extremely high cap, because if you can continue to generate loot via 5 Crystal Gambit, eventually you'll have so much board strength, either by the means of extra gold, the extra items, extra emblems, extra artifacts, no matter what it is, you'll have extra stuff on your board, which will eventually push your board to being overly saturated and way stronger than anything else in the game. It's a way of capping the board extremely high, and it specifically revolves around 5 Crystal Gambit in particular. Now, this used to also be something with 7 Crystal Gambit. 7 Crystal Gambit gives extra rewards, and it also gives you some HP and some damage amp, but it's no longer popular, no longer a real purpose to play 7 Crystal Gambit, because they nerfed it so many times that now it's 5 Crystal Gambit is good enough, right? If you have the emblem, you can go for it, but if you don't have an emblem, you don't have to necessarily play around the extra Crystal Gambit units. You can just stick to 5 and put in some higher quality units, because you get the reward cash outs anyways with 5, and that's enough to make this board cap out really high. So in the past, what this used to be was a roll for Malzahar or Ahri, and you would play it like a 3-cost reroll line. The main reason was the loot was a little bit different on previous patches, where 5 Crystal Gambit gave a lot of lesser duplicators, which made it easy to hit 3-star units. If you want to know, this is the 5 Crystal Gambit loot table. So when I talk about cashing out loot, basically it's depending on how many kills you roll. So if you roll 4 kills, you have a 50% chance of some gold, 50% chance of forecast, etc. 6 kills, 9 kills, 12 kills, 16 kills. The 16 kills ones are extremely potent because you can get a Strategist emblem. If you don't know, Strategist emblems are very powerful, not only because it activates the Strategist trait, which is a team-wide buff, but also the Strategist emblem itself gives extra armor and magic resist to adjacent allies, or it gives extra attack speed. So it has a dual, kind of support item-esque nature to it, which makes it one of the best emblems in the game. So if you get to a point where you're cashing out Strategist emblems and you're capping really high with that, you get to a point where you're ahead by extra augments. Think about it. An extra emblem on your board, that's the equivalent of being up a gold augment. An extra Ornn artifact, that's the equivalent of being up a gold augment. Well, if you have multiple of these cash outs, at one point you're going to be up so many gold augments that no board will be able to compete with you. And that's what makes it broken. And that's what makes it really strong, and what's making it a little bit more popular on the current patch. The other thing about Ashe that's great is that some of the worst cash outs, like the Duelist emblem cash out, is a little bit better by playing around Ashe. Now, I will say, the 6 kills one used to be the reason why you would play with reroll. You don't play with reroll anymore because the 6 kills cash out only gives 1 lesser dupe, I believe. It used to give 2. So now it's just like a lot worse. It's not as easy to spike and hit really ahead of tempo with this line unless you have a very specific situation to play it. That's why now with the Ashe buffs, you actually just end up playing around Ashe. So how do we optimize this board to be a little bit stronger? Well, let's talk about some of the fruits, some of the situations. For the keen eye observers that were watching this video, and you probably skip ahead and you're like, why the fuck is there a Kale on this guy's board? You know, for lack of a better term, Kale actually is interesting with this board as well, because there is some new tech, if you want to call it, with some of the fruits that were added to the game. But we'll go under power-ups. Basically, there's this thing called Fury Break. This is a really strong way of stabilizing around Ashe in your mid game, because basically Fury Break you can put on a lot of the duelist units. This was particularly good with like Gangplank reroll, but that's a little bit hard to get going because you need an artifact as well. But basically, 30% attack speed. When your other powered up unit dies, gain a burst of 300% attack speed that decays over 4 seconds. If you die first, give them the burst instead. This is very confusing. I understand if you read this and you're like, what's going on? I read this and I'm like, what's going on? But the main thing that you should think about is that whichever powered up unit dies, the other one gains a shit ton of attack speed. So what you can actually do with this board is you can put Fury Break on a Kale and just put her in the front line because she's a very inexpensive unit and she's going to die very early. And then in doing so, you can get your Ashe to pop off. So basically what you do with Ashe, you don't really need to build her with Gwinsu, but you could if you want to. But a lot of times you're going to do something like Fury Break on Kale, and then you're going to have a power up on Ashe. Usually on Ashe, it's something like Double Strike or one of those that just like allows her to scale really well because she's mostly an auto attacker. And you just stack Krakens on her, right? The Kraken got a buff in recent patches. So now Kraken stacks a lot faster, which means that the Ashe is going to get to the maximum Kraken stack a lot earlier, especially with any sort of duelist activated. So it's usually really good to stack some Krakens on Ashe. Additionally, she's really flexible with other items. You can go for other damage am. You can go for even an Edge of Night. Give her that clutch gene so she can't get sniped really easily. But you have lots and lots of different builds. Even a Gwinsu. Gwinsu got buffed as well. You can even go for like the El Clasico Gwinsu Kraken type of Ashe build. But I'm just saying, with a setup like this, a lot of times you can just go for pure damage and just stack Krakens, and this Ashe is going to hit like a truck. Additionally, you don't even need to do this Kale thing. This Kale thing is not necessary. It's like a nice to have, but you can easily put tank fruits on a Cassante or a Jarvan. You're pretty flexible with your front line because you basically have both of these 4 costs that you're rolling for that allows you to hit and stabilize pretty early or pretty easily. But this is essentially the board that you would play on level 8. Now, there's one major elephant in the room with this comp, and that is that this comp actually sucks as is. I know that that's going to sound a little bit wacky because we've just been talking and hyping it up right now, but please bear with me. Playing around this 5 Crystal Gambit board, this is not a particularly strong board. This is not a board that will win you a game. The point of playing this board is to cash out the 5 Crystal Gambit repeatedly to a point where this board becomes broken. That's the main thing that this board needs to have going. An Ashe on her own is still not enough. I stand by that. As much as she was buffed, as much as this board might seem strong, an Ashe on her own is not enough. This is not a game-winning board unless you get the kills. You need to get the kills and the cash outs for Crystal Gambit. So what makes this board really toxic is that if you are in a lobby where people are playing around other units, right, that they're playing around stuff, maybe they low rolled, maybe everybody's trying to fast 9 to play Lee Sin Twisted Fate, that's really popular. Maybe everybody's trying to fast 9 to play Seraphine Twisted Fate, right? There's a lot of people in the lobby, they're all greeting, they're all not making themselves really strong boards. That's where this board can shine, because if people aren't rolling on level 8, if people are greeting their econ, if people are trying to hit some high cap potential, because that's the way things have kind of been going on the current patches, playing around this board, this board that's arguably a little bit weaker, right? The Ashe doesn't pump out that much damage. It takes time to ramp up. You're really reliant on hitting your 4 cost front lines. It could be pretty expensive. It's going to be awkward to win, but if other people aren't rolling or aren't making a board, then you can win very easily. And as soon as you start the engine of getting the cash outs, you slowly put yourself further and further ahead of the rest of the lobby. If you can cash out an Ornn artifact, you're just up an Ornn artifact. If you can cash out an emblem, you're just up an emblem. Those are the things that are going to make this board pop off and do really well into late game. So when should you play this board? A lot of times, It's basically very similar, in my opinion, to a previous board in terms of playstyle and approach, and that is the mech board. Remember this from a patch or two ago? If you don't remember it or you didn't play a couple patches ago, there was a board where basically you would just play around 7 Mighty Mech. It got nerfed because like just recently, I think it got nerfed on like the 28th, so like a couple days ago. But since a couple days ago, it was one of the defining comps in the current meta. And basically the way that it worked was if you hit a Yona, you win, and if you don't hit a Yona, you're dead. That's kind of how it worked. So everybody would just play around it because if you hit the Yona, you win, and if you don't hit the Yona, you're dead. The Ashe board is very similar in that regard, except instead of just like hitting an Ashe, because like technically if you're rolling on level 8, you should be able to find an Ashe, you're basically hoping that on stage 4, so when you do your initial roll down to play around your 4 cost, you're hoping that you hit an Ashe upgrade and hopefully one of these guys upgraded. Because then you're at a point where it doesn't matter what other people have, you're going to be getting lots and lots of kills. If you try and play this comp and you low roll, and all you hit is a normal Ashe, or worst case scenario, you don't even hit an Ashe, so you're not even 5 Crystal Gambit, you're never getting those cash outs, you're not getting the kills, and you're going to be in a really, really bad spot, and a lot of times you can go 8th. So this comp kind of has that vibe where if you hit the Ashe early, if you play it from a head, if you play it from a high HP or high econ advantage, then you're going to be able to get those cash outs, which will put you in the game winning spot. However, if you don't hit the Ashe, or if you don't hit the upgrades, or if you're just weak in general because other people rolled their gold, like let's say a bunch of people played 4 cost boards, maybe somebody's playing Soul Fighter, maybe somebody's playing Volibear, right? If people aren't trying to greed and people aren't making their boards weaker on purpose, and you're not getting kills fast enough, you might just die anyways. That's the problem with the board, is that it doesn't cap and it doesn't do that well unless you get the cash outs. So when should you play this? When you could probably hit an Ashe too. That's what I would recommend if you're trying to be consistent. But you could also treat it kind of the way people treated Mighty Mech. It's basically like a lottery almost. It feels like a coin toss. You basically go for the Ashe, you go for the upgrades, and if you're strong enough to beat players, you basically just instant win. Now, there's one part of this board that I didn't quite mention yet, and that's going to be the final optimizations that you want to make towards the end of your game. If you have a lot of HP, you can just continue to cash out 5 Crystal Gambit. But what if you don't have a lot of HP? When do you stop? Do you just cash out Crystal Gambit for the rest of your life? Is that just your life? No. A lot of times with this board, if you high roll or you put yourself in a good spot, you can use these cash outs. A lot of them give an insane amount of gold. You can use it to do similar things that other people are doing in the lobby, and you can use it to fast 9. When you get to level 9, a lot of times you can drop the Crystal Gambit units. Now this is just an example board. There's many different variations, but basically you can just drop down to 3 Crystal Gambit or even less Crystal Gambit units. Here I just have 3 activated because Zyra and what's her name? Zyra and Janna make sense with this board, just the way that we're playing it, because it gives Cassante Protector, and then Zyra is just a good 5 cost to play because she buffs the whole board. But what you can do is you can start dropping the units for better units. You can play a Lee Sin. Sorry, a Lee Sin 2-star. You can play a Braum, right? Depending on who you hit, you can keep in some of the Crystal Gambit units, but eventually your end goal should be when you're on Death's Door, when you are low on HP, when you are 1 HP, when it's your last life or last lease at life. You don't care about cashing out anymore because you're not going to cash out. You're going to be dead in a turn, right? If you're going to be dead in a turn, spike your board. Get rid of some of the weaker units, and you can actually convert it into playing 5 costs, right? There's some 5 costs that are really broken with some synergies, like Duelist Emblem. We talked about it being somewhat useful on this board. A Duelist Emblem is broken on Twisted Fate. It's one of his best items because Twisted Fate, all he does is auto attack and he does an insane amount of damage. This makes it so he gets a bunch of extra true damage on top of that. It's absurdly good on Twisted Fate, right? That's a way of optimizing your board, and then Twisted Fate can scale you. A Lee Sin is broken. He's one of the best carries in the game. Pair that with some really hard to deal with frontline units like Jarvan and Cassante, especially if you get multiple Protector in. This Jarvan becomes a Giga Tank because with more Protector, he just gets an insane shield. He's so hard to deal with. At that point, you can actually win out by just relying on the 5 cost more so than relying on just the Ashe as your damage dealer. That's where this comp really shines, and I'm sure that you'll see it if you watch any like really good player, like tournament play for example, on the weekend. I was watching Regionals Day. So many people are just coin flipping playing around this comp. Why? Because if you actually hit, you basically can win out. Because if you can convert it to a point where you're putting all these 5 costs on your board and you have all the extra resources of extra emblems, extra items, extra artifacts, there's pretty much no other comp that can beat it. But it all starts with that initial kind of coin flippy nature, which is hitting the 5 Crystal Gambit, upgrading your Ashe and having a really strong stage 4. The main thing with this comp is the strong stage 4. Now, you could have a strong stage 4 from getting an initial Crystal Gambit cash out, right? In certain cases, you could do a Crystal Gambit lose streak into a hard convert into a 5 Crystal Gambit win out, right? Because you get the resources that allow you to spike really hard. You can have augments that do that. But for the most part, you really need to hit some upgrades here. Ideally, you upgrade everything. Maybe you don't have the Zyra, you play, what's her name, Syndra instead. But ideally, you have a Giga board where everything is upgraded, and then you rely on reestablishing your econ through the Crystal Gambit cash outs. You rely on getting 9 through the Crystal Gambit cash outs, and if you get the extra stuff where you're getting components, items, and artifacts, you then cap your board really high. So to answer the question that I was posing with this video, as a guide, is this comp broken? Yes, it's extremely broken. It's arguably the strongest comp in the game if you actually get it to work, but the risk factor is so large with it that the consistency is nowhere, right? If I'm talking about, like, you know, you're trying to rank up consistently, you're trying, like, you know, at one point, like, your LP gains, you know, you might see that you get a lot less for a first and you lose a lot more for an 8th, so it's like very, very skewed. This is a very first or 8th style comp, and you have to be prepared for that. You can just flip the coin. There might be 3 or 4 people trying to flip the same coin as you, and if one of you makes it out, you'll probably win. If you don't make it out, you're probably 8th. You should think of it very similar to how you would around a mech board, right? That's like the same nature that this has. It has a very high win out potential with a specific condition, which is being strong on stage 4, finding your upgrades. But at the same time, not hitting that, it will feel like the worst comp in the game. And then you'll come to me and you'll be like, but Fenrir, why did you troll my LP? And I'll say, it's a risky comp. So yes, it's broken, but be careful out there. But anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Additionally, if you can, please make sure to like and subscribe to my VOD channel. I'm trying to get the numbers up so that hopefully I have 2 channels running simultaneously. The videos on the VOD channel might be a little bit more sparse, but yesterday I did a very thorough VOD review of my last game on the current set where I hit Grandmaster. So you can check that out. Additionally, if you would like, you could also check out my Instagram. I'm gonna be posting a lot of art because now I'm just working on art because, like, you know, I'm still gonna do daily TFT guides, don't worry, but I'm focusing on doing art on stream because I'm trying to find happiness in the form of not playing this set because I don't like it. But anyways, have a great day. See ya. Bye bye.